Slow rolling a winning hand in a high-stakes poker game is a violation of an unwritten code that dates back to the very origins of the Mississippi riverboats, and yet it remains one of the most effective ways to completely dismantle an opponent's psychological composure. It's fascinating how a game defined by deception and taking people's money has such a rigid set of manners. Most people think poker etiquette is just about being polite, but it's actually a structural necessity that keeps the game from descending into chaos, or, historically, violence.
That historical point is vital because the stakes used to be physical safety, not just bankrolls. If you look at the 19th century frontier, etiquette wasn't a suggestion, it was a survival mechanism. Terms like splashing the pot, where you throw your chips into the center so the dealer can't count them, aren't just annoying for the staff. Back in the day, that was a classic move for a cheat to hide the fact they hadn't put in enough money. If you did that in a saloon in 1870, you weren't just getting a warning from a floor manager, you were risking a very physical confrontation.
It seems like the evolution of the game from those lawless saloons to the corporate-run casinos of modern Las Vegas has turned these unwritten rules into actual penalizable offenses. In the World Series of Poker, or WSOP, the rulebook is surprisingly dense about things like excessive chatter and even personal hygiene. They actually have a rule where tournament directors can penalize a player if their scent becomes a distraction to the table.
It sounds extreme, but it's about maintaining the integrity of the environment. When you're playing a tournament that lasts 12 hours a day for a week, any disruption to the flow is a strategic issue. The WSOP uses a system of missed hand penalties. If you're acting out of turn or berating a dealer, they don't just take your chips, they make you sit out for an entire orbit or more. This means you're still paying the blinds, but you're not allowed to see cards. It's the ultimate timeout for adults.
But isn't some of that bad behavior part of the psychological warfare? We see players like Phil Hellmuth or William Kassouf who make a career out of being loud and disruptive. Kassouf famously used speech play to tilt his opponents, and while he was within the rules for a long time, the floor eventually stepped in. Where is the line between a valid strategic play and an etiquette violation?
The line is usually drawn at delay of game or verbal abuse. In Kassouf's case, during the 2016 main event, he was taking an incredibly long time to make every single decision while talking nonstop. The WSOP eventually put him on a shot clock, which is rare for a single player. From a technical standpoint, etiquette serves to protect the speed of the game. If you're a winning player, you want as many hands per hour as possible. By slowing down the game, you're literally reducing your own hourly win rate and everyone else's. That's why professionals are often the most disciplined when it comes to acting in turn.
Let's break down some of the more technical violations because they're often accidental for new players. String betting is a big one. You see it in movies all the time where a character says, "I'll call your 500 and raise you another 1,000. In a real casino, the second you say, "I call," you've made a binding action. You can't add a raise after that.
Exactly. The rule is one motion. If you don't announce your total bet verbally before moving your hands, you have to put all the chips out in one single forward motion. If you drop a stack, go back to your pile and grab more. The dealer will stop you and only count the first batch. This prevents a specific type of angle shooting, where a player puts out a small amount, watches their opponent's reaction, and then decides whether to add more based on if the opponent looks scared or ready to call. It's all about closing loops of information that shouldn't be available.
You mentioned angle shooting, which is a term that gets thrown around a lot. It's essentially the gray area between being a jerk and being a cheat. One common example is the fake fold or the fake call, where someone makes a motion like they're tossing their cards away to see if the other player reacts with relief. It's not technically breaking a hard rule of card physics, but it's considered toxic in the community.
The most blatant recent example was Ivan Freitas at the European Poker Tour. He had the literal best hand, the nuts, and he announced raise, but made it look like a mistake, saying, "I mean call." He was trying to trick his opponent into thinking he was weak and just made a verbal slip-up. The tournament director actually forced him to play it as a raise and warned the other player that Freitas was known for this specific angle. It's one of the few times you'll see a floor man actually give strategic advice to an opponent to protect the game's fairness.
That's a wild level of intervention. It shows that the reputation aspect of etiquette mentioned in the notes isn't just about making friends. If the floor staff knows you're an angle shooter, they won't give you the benefit of the doubt on any close calls. This ties into the relationship with the dealer. Tipping isn't mandatory, especially in Europe, but in the US, it's a huge part of the culture. A standard tip is often about 1% of the pot, or a flat dollar for most hands.
And from a strategic perspective, being on the dealer's good side is plus EV, or positive expected value. A dealer who likes you will keep the game moving faster, catch errors that might hurt you, and generally keep the mood light. If you're the person berating the dealer for a bad beat, which is statistically ridiculous since the dealer just pulls cards from a randomized deck, you're creating a miserable environment. Research in behavioral economics, like the Cornell study by Kyle Seiler, shows that players perform significantly worse when they're on tilt or emotionally compromised. If you create a hostile table, you're actually increasing the chances that you'll make an emotional, irrational decision.
The Seiler study is interesting because it analyzed 27 million online hands and found that novice players often overvalued winning many small pots while losing everything on one big mistake. Poor etiquette, like complaining about bad beats, is often a sign of that exact novice mindset. You're signaling to the table that you don't understand variance. If you're angry that your aces lost to a 7-2 offsuit, you're telling the professionals that you're an emotional player who's likely to overplay hands in the future to get even.
Right. Silence is often the best etiquette and the best strategy. There's a rule called one player to a hand. You shouldn't talk about the cards you folded while other people are still playing, even if it's just a whisper to your neighbor. If you mention you folded a king and the board has a king on it, you've just given free information to everyone still in the pot. You've potentially ruined the hand for someone else. This is a massive breach of etiquette that often gets people kicked out of home games.
It's different online, though. The software handles the rules, like acting in turn or not string betting, but the etiquette shifts to the chat box. Slow rolling exists online too, where someone intentionally waits until the very last second of their time bank to call with the winning hand just to be annoying. It's called tanking, and while it's a valid strategy when you have a hard decision, doing it with the absolute best hand is just purely meant to frustrate.
Tanking is a great example of the tension between strategy and etiquette. In high-level tournament poker, players will balance their timing. They take the same amount of time for every decision so they don't give away timing tells. If you act instantly when you have a weak hand but think for a minute when you're strong, you're an open book. So some stalling is actually high-level strategy. But for a casual player in a $1-2 cash game, taking 2 minutes to decide whether to fold 10-4 offsuit is just disrespectful to everyone's time.
Let's talk about the showdown. There's often a bit of a standoff when the betting is over. Who shows first? The rule is generally that the person who took the last aggressive action, the last bet or raise, must show first. If everyone checked the last round, it goes in order of position starting from the left of the dealer. A common etiquette mistake is slow rolling here, where you wait for the other person to show their losing hand before you reveal your winner.
Slow rolling is considered the single worst thing you can do short of actual cheating. It's a fake-out. You pretend you lost, wait for them to celebrate or turn over their cards, and then you show the winner. It's humiliating. There's a famous clip of Jack Urey, who was 96 at the time, slow-rolling a much younger player at the WSOP. He got away with it because of his age, and it was seen as gamesmanship by a legend. But if a 25-year-old pro did that, the table would be ready to riot.
It feels like poker etiquette is this invisible glue that turned a game of outlaws into a professional sport. Even the way you stack your chips matters. You're supposed to keep them in neat stacks of 20, with the high-value chips clearly visible at the front. Hiding a big chip behind a stack of small ones is another form of angle shooting, because it misleads your opponent about how much money you actually have. Most rooms will actually give you a warning for that.
It's about informed consent in a way. The game is about deception regarding your cards, but not about the basic facts of the game state, like whose turn it is or how much money is on the table. When you respect those boundaries, you're actually protecting yourself. If you're known as a fair, fast, and respectful player, you get invited back to the best home games. Those private games are where the real money is made, and they are strictly invite-only based on your reputation. If you're a nit who complains and slow rolls, your seat will be filled by someone else very quickly.
So the takeaway is that etiquette isn't just about being a nice person. It's about the efficiency of the game and your own long-term profitability. By acting in turn, keeping your cards visible, and being a gracious loser, you're signaling that you're a professional. You're reducing the friction of the game. If you're focused on the cards and the math rather than arguing with the dealer or trying to trick people with chip movements, you're going to play better poker.
And you'll avoid the tilt that comes from those unnecessary conflicts. Poker is hard enough when you're just fighting the cards and the house edge. You don't need to be fighting the 7 other people at the table and the staff on top of that. Mastering the unwritten rules is the first step to being taken seriously in any card room, whether it's a local club in Texas or the neon halls of Vegas. It's the difference between being a tourist and being a player.
It really is the silent language of the table. Once you know it, you see the game in a completely different way. You stop seeing a bet as just chips and start seeing the mechanics behind the motion. If you found this dive into the hidden world of the felt useful, share this with a friend who's looking to move from the kitchen table to the casino floor.